So this is my review of Kong Skull Island, where I tell you where I land on it. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel and another installment of my MonsterVerse review series, where I'm reviewing the 3 movies leading up to Godzilla vs. Kong. I already reviewed the first film, 2014's Godzilla, and today we're talking Kong Skull Island. So let me know before we begin what your thoughts on Skull Island were in the comments below. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button as it helps me out immensely by getting my channel out there, and if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with reviews of new releases, classics, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. But let's jump right into it and let's talk about Kong Skull Island. This stars John Goodman as a washed-up monster chaser who convinces the US government to fund a trip to an unexplored island in the South Pacific. Under the guise of geological research, the team travels to Skull Island. Upon arrival, the group discover that their mission may be complicated by the wildlife which inhabits the island. Just as a reminder, as with my other reviews of older films, I will be discussing spoilers for this. If you haven't seen this movie by now and wish to know nothing, this is your spoiler warning. Go watch the movie first and then come back to this. But anyway, here we go. Max Borenstein, who also wrote Godzilla, returns to co-write this, along with Dan Gilroy and Derek Connolly, and it's directed by Jordan Vogt Roberts, who also directed 2013's The Kings of Summer. And it actually serves as a prequel to Godzilla, taking place in 1973. And it has an old-school Hollywood feel to it, looking to really capture the feel of that era. It's like a mix of the Skull Island sequence specifically in the Peter Jackson 2005 King Kong movie, mixed with Apocalypse Now, the latter of which Vogt Roberts stated was an influence on this. For this film, we get a rock and pop-heavy soundtrack weaved in with a traditional score by Henry Jackman, and it establishes a much different tone than the grim, ultra-serious Godzilla. While Jackman's score manages to highlight the thrills of the more high-stakes moments, this is also an adventure movie, and he finds a balance with some lighter tracks to offset the more serious sequences. All the while, we'll get a musical interlude where we'll hear songs like Black Sabbath's Paranoid or a few Creedence Clearwater Revival songs. And while this isn't exactly your traditional King Kong film, as it features none of the characters from the original story besides Kong himself, and there's no attempt to actually bring Kong back to the US in this version, it still contains hints of the traditional story elements. John Goodman's Bill Randa, who's one of the more antagonistic characters here, shares similar qualities to Jack Black's portrayal of Carl Denham in the Peter Jackson version, though just cranked up a notch. He's willing to lie and cheat his way into getting what he wants, but unlike Carl Denham, he doesn't exactly hide his disdain for others all that much.
What are you, an idiot? You think they asked Emil if he would waste his time on nudie shots? No, they respected the filmmaker. They showed some class. Not that you'd know what that means, you cheap lowlife.
Our other 2 main characters on this journey are Tom Hiddleston as James Conrad, an ex-Vietnam vet who's brought on as a hunter-tracker to lead the expedition, and Brie Larson as Mason Weaver, an anti-war photographer. They remain close throughout the film, and while this isn't a romantic relationship, the way they bond and interact with each other in such a kind, friendly way reminded me heavily of the romance between Adrian Brody's Jack Driscoll and Naomi Watts' Ann Darrow in the 2005 King Kong.
Thank you.
Though if there's one thing I'm glad this did is not turn this into a romance, as that's a trope that too many films go down, sometimes feeling shoehorned in. Unlike your typical King Kong movies where it's a decent-sized crew, but you can keep track of who's who, this is a much larger group this time around. In addition to Randa's own crew of scientists, there's also a military presence, with a group led by Samuel L. Jackson as a character named Preston Packard. On top of that, the group eventually runs into John C. Reilly as a World War II soldier named Hank Marlowe, who has been stuck on the island since the war and has found a home with the island's natives. And I gotta say, this film is overstuffed with characters, and as a result, not too many of them are developed. The closest we get are Riley, who we learn has a family and also provides some background info on the island itself, as well as provide some levity, and Jackson, who loses some of his men early on to the hands of Kong and then goes on a path of revenge, even when he learns Kong's actually not bad. Jackson himself, in an interview, compares his character to Moby Dick's Captain Ahab, who is obsessed with the eye for eye mentality, which I'd say is a pretty spot-on comparison.
You are going to tell me everything I don't know, or I'm going to blow your head off.
While you have a great cast, the lack of strong characters causes the film to only hit so many emotionally high points whenever something happens to them. Goodman's character especially, while initially interesting as we see him lie his way into getting onto Skull Island, immediately becomes a lot more disposable once we actually get to the island. After getting grilled by Jackson not too long after arriving, he's pushed to the side and the focus shifts to all the other characters, and he even gets killed off not too long after the halfway mark. This is another bait and switch in the MonsterVerse after Bryan Cranston's character in Godzilla, where we think he's going to play a much bigger part, only to be disposed of earlier than expected. Though, unlike Godzilla, the characterization, while as I said isn't great, also isn't as weak as it was in Godzilla, and we actually do enjoy spending time with most of the people here. Not because they're well written necessarily, but because of the slightly breezier tone the film has in certain scenes, as well as the fact that the cast elevates much of the material. Tom Hiddleston and Brie Larson's characters especially, while we do follow them around for much of the film, only have one or two notable qualities about them, but because the actors themselves have likable, charismatic personalities, they manage to make the characters enjoyable. The same goes for the many supporting characters, who include Corey Hawkins as one of Goodman's assistants, as well as Jason Mitchell, Shea Wiggum, and Thomas Mann as some of Jackson's men. They all try giving each of their characters personalities, with a little bit of humor thrown in there, and it's their performances that make us care. Though of course the main reason we go to see a movie called Kong Skull Island is for Kong himself, and he's pretty solid here. Unlike Godzilla, he gets considerably more screen time in his own film, though again, the film's attention is still divided among so many characters that when it hits some dramatic beats with the character, it only hits so hard. Similar to a traditional King Kong movie, the film highlights how Kong is actually a misunderstood creature, here being how he's actually protective of the natives and defends the island. And that characterization pits him especially against Jackson, whose stubbornness and insistence on revenge blinds him from seeing or caring about the truth, and it turns him into more of the antagonist as the film goes on, and a pretty solid one at that. Kong also gets to fight these creatures known as skull crawlers, which is a nickname given by Riley's character, which, as Vo Roberts even points out, looks like a more reptilian version of Cubone from Pokemon if he was crossed with the creatures on Skull Island from the 1933 film. And anytime we get to see Kong or the skull crawlers in action, it was a lot of fun. The film feels very fast-paced, and what it lacks in characterization, it makes up for heavily in very intense, high-energy action scenes, either of the humans trying to escape the skull crawlers or Kong fighting the skull crawlers, and it makes the 2-hour runtime go by pretty quickly. Now, while this movie was positively received by critics, I feel it's quickly been tossed to the side and often dismissed as, at best, okay. And I get it, as it mainly is for the reasons I listed earlier regarding the characters. And as I said, similar to Godzilla, the film doesn't quite hit the emotional highs that it could have hit. Though to be honest, I remembered enjoying this film when I saw it for the first time, and I actually found myself liking it even more when rewatching it for this review. While I'm always someone who prefers strong characterization in films, I'm also down for a solid genre-heavy film, whether it be horror, sci-fi, action, or whatever it may be, that may be light on characterization, but is also a lot of fun for going all in on whatever that genre it is, in this case being an action movie. Like I said, we got to see the monsters in action a lot here, and it serves as a very entertaining film, especially for just how well done some of these scenes are. My hands down 2 favorite moments come in the second half. One being the dinosaur graveyard sequence, where all of our characters have to escape the skull crawlers while navigating the mist, and the final confrontation among Kong, the skull crawlers, and Samuel L. Jackson, with the rest of the characters trying to get Jackson to back off from killing Kong. The direction by Vo Roberts was great, and he makes these situations feel high stakes and full of suspense that usually pay off in a well-timed manner. That, along with the actors doing their best to give this film a personality, allowed me to have a good time with this. I think Kong Skull Island is better than what people give it credit for. It's far from the best adaptation of King Kong out there, but honestly for what it is, it's pretty fun. It wears its cinematic influences heavily on its sleeve, doing so in what feels like a fun, loving tribute to the older Kong movies, as well as films like Apocalypse Now. And while it suffers from a lack of strong characterization, it's made up by the talents of a great cast who do their best to give this film some charm, as well as Vo Roberts' solid direction that gives way for some fun action scenes that make this film go by fast. I think it's a pretty underrated movie, and one that I think is worth watching. Kong Skull Island gets a 7.5 out of 10.
Pretty good.
Yes, it is. It is.
Pretty. pretty good.
Stay tuned. Up next, I'll have a review out for Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and in the meantime, let me know, did you see Kong Skull Island, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you like this movie more than Godzilla? Do you have a favorite King Kong movie in general? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it. And for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone, and keep having fun with film.